Hello, everyone. Karington here from Open Heart Games. I am here live with fellow veteran game master Patrick Drobotij, pronounced nobody quite like Drobotij. Patrick is a veteran game master in the Star Wars universe. He is also quite possibly one of the most organized game masters that I've ever had the pleasure of working alongside. With that, I will let you take over and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Patrick.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick. I've been GMing for what has to be, I think, 20 plus years. I like to think, as far as like the hobby goes, I will play pretty much anything once and try all sorts of stuff. I'm big into the Genesis Edge of the Empire system, D&D 5e, Free League games, Shadowrun, pretty much anything. So also
a very
board
omnivorous
games.
gamer.
Yes, very much. I always called myself the Omni Nerd because I like to paint. I like to play war games. I think the only thing I don't do anymore is trading card games, just because I can't keep up with the meta. My pocketbook can't keep up with the meta.
Oh, I understand. I purchased a slight tangent when what was it called? Conquest, the Warhammer 40k Conquest game.
Yes.
I had zero interest in that game. And then I heard that it was going out of print, and I was like, all right then, and just bought everything. Because then I have a game that's perfectly frozen, and like I own all of the stuff for it, so I can just, pick a point in the meta where I can buy it. And plus, as the game was canceled, everything was on sale, and I was just like, well, yes, I'll take all of these things for $5 a piece.
Yeah, I don't think that's a collectible game that went up in value once it was discontinued.
This is true, but now it has several of the things and some of the later stuff, because like anything when they changed everything, they short printed the last three, and some of those like packs that are normally like MSRP of like $15 were going like $30-$40 online at the time.
I can see that. I picked up a book for an out of the Dark Heresy second edition, last book, Lathe Worlds. I spent a pretty penny on it, unfortunately. So
speaking of running games in established universes, so today's focus is may the story be with you. We're going to be focusing a lot on Star Wars, but also we're going to be talking about what it means to run games in already established universes. And what do we mean by established universes? So these are going to be role-playing games that already have established storylines, familiar characters, familiar settings, familiar things like that. And this could be a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be Star Wars. It could be One Ring, J.R.R. Tolkien. It could be Dark Heresy that we were talking about. There's a lot of lore attached to those, and for some players that can be intimidating, but can also be very exciting because it gives us an opportunity as storytellers and as game masters to kind of weave our own little fabric in there. So how would you define I guess an established universe, or what established universes do you enjoy?
I pretty much enjoy all established universes. So I mentioned Free League games, and I just finished playing in the second out of the box campaign for the Aliens universe. And we started playing roughly 9 months ago, and 9 months ago I would have told you could not have a good RPG based on the Aliens movie universe, because it really just takes it out of what the movies are. But it was a blast. It was tense. It was horrific. It kept us on our toes. Characters could die at the drop of a hat. It was amazing. So going back to the question, is like pretty much I like to play in anything that I've kind of got an attraction towards, which would be pretty much Star Wars, sci-fi, Warhammer, fantasy, Lord of the Rings, pretty much anything like that. And for me, playing an established universe is like, what would I call it? It's like playing anything that's at some kind of extended meta, whether it's comics, books, TV shows. I know they just announced there's the G.I. Joe and Transformers role-playing games, came out from Renegade Games.
Yep.
Any of those.
Excellent. And I do want to, while we have a quick break in the action, encourage anyone who's listening in and who's watching, if you want to throw a question in chat, for myself, for Patrick, for both of us, we'll be more than happy to get to those questions, and we'll prioritize them over the questions that we have right now.
Yes.
I guess what is the, kind of jumping ahead through some of the questions that I have, because I feel like we covered a little bit of this. What would you say is your favorite part of the Star Wars RPG? And then we'll talk about some challenges of the Star Wars RPG.
My favorite part of the Star Wars RPG is the dice system. I believe the formal name is the narrative dice
Yep.
system.
And we're talking about the Fantasy Flight Games version.
Yes, yeah. So I will. Yeah, I speak entirely to the Fantasy Flight Edge of the Empire. I think it's technically now the Genesis system is the base. And I love that's my favorite aspect to the game because of every RPG I've ever played. It is the game. It is the mechanic that gives the player the most agency in any role-playing game I've ever played. And to surmise for the listeners that don't know anything about this system, it uses dice with symbols. If anyone's played FFG's Warhammer RPG, very similar, where there are 7 results. You have blank, 3 like major success, minor success, major failure, and minor failure. And so essentially, you could not get any successes, but you could get minor successes, which means like you shoot at someone, and so it misses, but it causes the stormtrooper to dive out of cover, and now he's prone, or now it gives an advantage to the next player. And for players that really engage in it, they can help create the story of the scene, and that dice system extends beyond just combat. It's social skills and like hacking skills and driving. Like you get an awesome driving roll. You're like, oh, my character, drives over this ramp and causes something to fall, and the stormtrooper is like running to the cabbage cart. That kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and there always has to be some kind of fruit or cabbage cart.
Exactly.
Speaking of, also now the Avatar RPG is now an established universe as well.
Yes. So. Yeah, it is. I just got my beta for that.
Oh yeah, very excited about that as well. So one of the things that I just kind of to speak to the same question, things that I like is how open-ended it is, and it does encourage player agency. It encourages creativity. It encourages players to say, okay, well, I rolled a success, or I rolled an advantage, and even though I failed, I think I'd like to go ahead and use these advantages to hit the lights and make everything dark so we can make our getaway. It encourages them to be a part, as opposed to just I love Dungeons and Dragons, but a lot of time it's pass fail. But having those shades of gray, as far as like you can have a super success or a super failure, and everything in between, as you discussed with the 7 different options.
Exactly.
So the force powers too. I love how the force powers in this are very much like especially like the power move. Like the power move is like you can move an object up to a size, and the question is, what can you do with it? Can you pick up yourself? Can you pick up someone else? Can you like move them around and whatnot? And the answer is sure. Why not? Yeah. And they encourage you to use those powers differently. Like, for example, sense and foresee can be used in different situations and whatnot. And so I like that kind of free form where everything is left vague and it's left up to. I would say it's kind of the opposite of it can have some crunch, but it's not nearly as crunchy, as math heavy as some of the other ones, which is very distinct rules. It's very open-ended, and I really like that.
Now, speaking to some of the difficulties of the game, I would almost say double-edged sword. The narrative dice system can also be a challenge. So, one, it's unlike any game mechanic. When I first played it, it was like any game mechanic I first tried. Now, mind you, we're pushing a decade on this game system. So, and in that 10 years, role-playing games have really blossomed as far as like diversity of what people think, the pass-fail system. And so that can be a challenge. Educating new players have never done anything like that. But also sometimes the endless options, can sometimes stall out gameplay. And it's kind of, or if you have players who don't really want to, kind of work with the dice system, they just want to roll and they want you to tell them, it puts a lot of pressure on the GM. And that's fine. I like coming up with crazy ideas, and I've had some really innovative or I thought imaginative things happen because the player didn't really care. I'll say what happens for good or bad. Yeah,
and one of the things I will say happens, especially with new players when you're first explaining the dice system, is what I call the Star Wars stare, which is where they grab this huge mountain of dice. They throw them at the table, they look at all the symbols, and then they just look up at you, and they're like, I'm sure you've seen that look.
Oh, yeah.
They're just like, what does this mean?
Yeah, where it becomes like, it's just a mental math. I'm doing, they've rolled it, I've already done the mental math. I'm like, that's 1 triumph, 2 despair, like 2 failures and 3 advantages.
Yeah.
And so, and I got to get like it's training people on a very alternative system, and just like, hey, there's ways like they teaching people to line up the dice and in a way that makes sense to them. But you're right, that's the 1,000-yard stare. So.
And I will say that one of the things that's kind of nice is Roll20 has an API that actually does all of the what I'm gonna big air quotes here. It does the math for you. So, like, for example, you say, all right, it needs to be this many dice, rolling this, or you can click the skill. You can say, you set the difficulty on your character sheet, and then you click the skill, and it'll roll it, and it does the math for you, and it'll be like, all right, you have 3 successes and 1 threat.
Yes.
And that's it. So that's really nice.
I've been using Foundry to start working on Edge of the Empire, and its dice rolling system is amazing. Like, I wish I'd had this 8 years ago. So
yeah, just to be able to take some of that crunch and just move the story along. So what would you say that some of the misconceptions are about running games in established universes such as Star Wars?
Well, especially something like Star Wars that has a massively extensive lore. What is and is not right as to the extent of how the game's universe exists. Like, people are like, well, that didn't happen in this, that did happen in this. You should include this, like this lore, this character, like Thrawn from Legends should be accurate, be the accurate character representation. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions of like the box of like how boxed in the universe is. And I like my preconceived notions about the Aliens RPG. Like, oh, it can only fit in this little space. And really, it's up to the GM and the players to really kind of develop what they think is right for the world.
I definitely agree with that. And one of the things that I try to do in my games, especially if I'm running in established universes such as Star Wars or even Lord of the Rings, is I try to avoid, and obviously some modules will have this in there, but if I'm running my own homebrew, I'm already using the setting. So I feel more comfortable because I'm familiar with all of the locations. But my players will never come across a named character. They will not come across Han Solo. They will not come across Lando Calrissian. They will not come across Darth Vader, if I can help it.
Yes.
Because those characters have their story. This story that we are telling here in the Star Wars universe, this is your story. And we're going to focus on your characters. Now, may those characters who are really important, the Skywalkers and so on, be mentioned? Absolutely. We maybe talk about the war that's happening in the background. But the focus, in my opinion, should just be on the characters. And you don't want to have that awkward instance where a character kills Darth Vader and then what happens? So we just have a divergent timeline and so on and so forth. So, but that's my approach. Is I want to create my own little corner of the universe where they don't have to worry about this. Yeah.
I agree. So I'm not sure if anyone remembers the first Star Wars MMO, Star Wars Galaxies, but their advert campaign in magazines at the time was like, is a picture all the important people in the background. There's like a stormtrooper, and it's like, what's his story? What's her story? And I'm like, I'm like you. I'm the same way. Like again, you might be in Tatooine, you might be on Coruscant, but you're never gonna see anyone. Now, I will say, for some players, they might want to run a scenario where their characters were Team B, always running parallel to A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back,
Rogue One or something like that.
And if that's your flavor, I don't know, because some people, they want their players to interact with these major players, and maybe they want to create their own homebrew. Cameron, go for it. But again, I'm with you. Like, the world is so vast. You have the more shows that go on the air, the more world there is to draw from, and you still have every video game, every Legends book, multiple RPG settings with their own. Like, you can just make it whatever you want.
We do have a question in chat, but I'd like to posit the idea that I think that Rogue One is a really good formula for your traditional party campaign. You have a bunch of different characters who should not be working together, who have a bunch of different goals, who end up having to work together to do something important and great. And I think that, and also they do not have plot armor. Spoiler alert. They all die. So I think that that's really, I think that it's a really good formula, like because again, you have all these people from different places, they have different kinds of characters, and you could definitely make similar characters to do a similar kind of suicide mission in that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. Like, to the point, like, so if you think of Edge of the Empire, we were playing kind of the scums and villains and scoundrels. Like, they could be at the cantina. Mm-hmm. They're just at the cantina a week later, and maybe they run into Hammerhead, a secondary characters that whatever their life, their story arc is kind of irrelevant.
So the question is, and it's from Trevlix, in an established universe, when would you break away from quote canon? I'll let you field that one first.
But I have my golden rule. My golden rule is the rule of cool. I know that sounds like I should be wearing sunglasses and a trench coat from 1990s, but it's like whenever it is best for my players' engagement and fun. If it drives my players to have a better time and I'm having a good time, that's when I do it. Now, I mean, and again, the narrative dice, something might happen where I'm like, man, these dice just told us what happened, and we're gonna roll with it. So, but generally, when I try to think of my players' fun first. Absolutely. So if it works great for that, that's when I do it.
I think when it comes to that, like, I'm not going to stick to I'm not going to get to every sticking point of each thing of the canon. I'm going to use the Star Wars galaxy as a backdrop, and it's just that. It is it's like scenery. It's in the background, but the characters that I'm creating, and the situations that I'm putting them in, the biggest setting that I might use is going to be a planet, but planets are massive. We live on one, and there are surely unexplored parts of that planet that I can use to then explore. I don't want to take them to any of the main locations. Like, there are more. There are tons of other settlements on Tatooine because everything in the world happens on Tatooine. It seems. So for me, the way that I avoid breaking canon is the established universe is happening in the background, and then my character's story is stuff that's going on. So imagine there are different Marvel movies where a character walks in front of a screen and there's a news story going on behind them of the greater, the bigger Marvel universe and whatnot. That's what's happening in mine. There are events and there are things that people are talking about, but it's not going to affect the players, nor should the players have to or be able to affect that. They have their mission that needs to be separate and their story that needs to be separate.
So an example I'd like to talk about is so as something like Star Wars, we get more media around it, and more like comics are technically canon. Like, the more there is, the harder it is to maintain canon. And so I just think it's a universe with rubber band walls. Like, do you have the Empire? Do you have Force users? Do you have Hutts who are trying to run spice against the Pikes? Like, those as long as you keep those general aspects, great. But an example, I did a homebrew content about the Pikes, and Book of Boba Fett totally legend my campaign. And
sure,
but you know what? But guess what? I had Pikes running spice, doing illegal activities. That's good enough. Because I mean, if you try to stick to all those what is and is not supposed to be, you'll just drive yourself nuts.
So here's my question for you. And I think this also feeds very well into Trevlix's question, and also one of my other questions, which is the Star Wars universe is in an era of constant flux and change. So what do you do if you're running a story and suddenly, because of what happens in Obi-Wan, or what happens in the latest movie, or what happens in the latest novel that comes out, that your story's no longer canon, or there's a problem with that? How do you handle that situation?
So it kind of goes back to how I run my sessions with my players. Now, I have a situation where I run with established players. I've been running these with these same players. They're now some of my closest friends for years. And what we've decided is, like, I want to hear open debate. What do people think? If people are very strongly opinionated on one thing and I think that's acceptable, let's go with it. If I don't know, Obi-Wan changes some major background with Inquisitors or Tatooine or the rise of the Empire. Like, we'll talk to my players, and we can shift unless it really, really derails my campaign and causes me to do hours and hours of work. I'll talk to my players about it, kind of come to a consensus. If there's a lot of varying opinions, I make the ruling call. But I do listen to my players and what they have to say.
I guess my approach to this is, like, I try, just to kind of quote Obi-Wan Kenobi here, I try to make sure that mine is still canon, from a certain point of view. And
I like that a lot.
If I can find a clever way to tie it in and even excuse it, and I will say this, this is a hill that I will die on. Rogue One took what was viewed as a long-time plot hole of Star Wars and made it into a central plot point with Stardust, Project Stardust. And I'm is it Galen Erso, the father?
Yep, that's correct.
He created the fatal flaw in the Death Star to destroy it. Like, originally it was just seen as an engineering flaw, but he did it on purpose, and they made that into a plot point, and they turned it from the one of the things that was the butt of Star Wars
many a joke
for decades, and turned it into, like, this is the central thing that we're telling in the story. So if I can find a clever way to tie that in and change the thing and be like, oh, well, yeah, some Jedi do this or that or what have you, I'm going to do that. Because if if Dave Filoni and all of those folks can do it, well, then sure, I can too. Why not? Because we're all storytellers, right?
And you lead into a perfect example of the Death Star plan. So Rogue One was, as far as I know, the third story element, third time they tried to tell the story of the Death Star plans. I believe the first one was the Han Solo trilogy books written in, I think, early 90s. Mm-hmm. Then Dark Forces 1 with Kyle Katarn. He stole the Death Star plan. And in my opinion, all three were equally good stories.
Yeah.
So, like it's not like, oh, they're canonizing one thing and it was just a really bad idea. It's like they're trying to canonize a lot of competing good ideas. And so which one is great for your group? Like, if you really love the concept of Kyle Katarn and how he runs it, how I like his plot arc, and you want him to be incorporated in your stories, okay. Yep. Then that was how it happened. Rogue One didn't happen. Or maybe he was at Rogue One. He was the lone survivor. I don't know. Yep. It's just whatever makes a great story.
Absolutely. And one of the things to really kind of hammer home that same thing is just to try to create your own story, and you don't have to worry too much about whether or not it is canon. In Critical Role, I've been reading a lot of that lately because I'm preparing for Call of the Netherdeep, and I think that campaign looks fantastic. Okay. They talk about the myth of Exandria, which is this idea that each culture has their own explanation for why the world is the way it is and how the world came to be. So, again, from that kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi sage, like, oh yes, I did tell you the truth from a certain point of view. Tell your own story. And, if it ends up diverging from what's considered to be canon, then so be it. Maybe your way is how it happened, as you said.
So I'm going to make a throwback to a non-Star Wars RPG thing one of my friends ran, and it was, we're teenagers, we're just running RPGs kind of off the hip, and we're playing Shadowrun, and next thing you know, my friend converted it to Aliens with Shadow mechanics, and somehow it's like, oh yeah, you get stuck on the US Saleco, whatever, he changed the name very generically, and it was, to this day, it was so much fun, and it made no sense, it was bonkers, but our group had a blast. So
I played in a Roll20 modern Roll20 future campaign. The story was this: the Mayan calendar ends, the apocalypse is unleashed, and when that happens, a seal is broken, and these ancient primordial gods of death are unleashed, and there's mass hysteria and pandemonium, and a lot of death happens. And though, and then everyone who died is raised as zombies, and you have a zombie apocalypse. So this all happens, and I was going to school, so I was jumping in and out of this campaign. So it started there with this zombie apocalypse, and it changed to each person who had survived this zombie apocalypse. In order to survive, they like hyper evolved, so everyone ended up getting like superpowers and stuff like that, which was cool. But I came back, and suddenly, like, I looked around and I was like, "We're on a starship? Like, what happened? How did this happen?" Which, I mean, and that is not at all. I want to say this because the person who ran the game is a dear friend of mine. That is not at all a critique of the campaign. It was just for the people who were watching the story. And playing it, the arc was very smooth, and for me, someone who was going back and forth from college, it was just like zombie apocalypse. We have superpowers. We're on spaceships. Like, it was very confusing, and then suddenly we were on a new world in a different timeline, and so it was really cool.
It was your RPG version of Sharknado.
Yeah, RPG version.
Each one just kept getting more out of hand.
It felt like, to me, it felt like Quantum Leap, because I just kept like jumping back in the campaign. I'm like, I'm back, and now I'm level 13. And then I was just like, wait, what's going on here? All right, we have a question from Hey Ahes 2021. Does running a game that exists in universes that people are so passionate about require different methods of prep? Do you find it more difficult? Or find that the pressure is higher?
So I will say I have played with a lot of dedicated fans. I have never played with one that was, I would say, a corrective dedicated fan. Someone who says like, oh, that, per what, scene 2 at, 30 minutes in, that wouldn't have happened. So I don't feel that pressure. I would say there's more prep because I really want to create a living universe, and I believe like one of the questions you had for me is like, how do you make like a game like a universe, an established universe game feel alive? And so I spend more time Googling and making sure I have quotes memorized and small references. You're pretty sure like I don't want to spoil Book of Boba Fett, but the last episode had a lot of people making analogies and quotes. I'm like, oh, I can use that now. Mm-hmm. So you think the different point of view, like quote, like kind of subtly throwing in things like that, watching movies and saying making references to companies and locations and drinks. So I will say there's more work on that, but that is all per the GM. Some people are just happy that you mentioned Coruscant, but some people want to want you to accurately describe a nerf. That kind of thing. So it's all up to the GM, but I will say there is definitely more. I think there can be more pressure depending on the type of player you have, but mine have all been pretty easy going about it.
Excellent. So for me, I like to, like you said, I like to put in those little Easter eggs of things that I enjoy to try and kind of like dot them through. And I think that Mandalorian did a very good job as far as storytelling with this. And I think that as a game master who's running a game in an established universe, it is you should reward your players who are the super fans with those little like tidbits, those little things. Yep. But those Easter eggs are just that. They don't need to be the central plot. You don't need to know all of the intricacies and the planets that were affected by the Yuzong Vong War in order to, which is now Legends, in order to understand the plot that you're trying to say, unless you have an entire table of superfans.
But no, you can say, the characters are going down the darkened alley, something skitters, and a womp rat, comes out of the trash and goes down the side alley. Just like, for me, less is more. Mm-hmm. It's like you guys land in Tatooine as you see the Millennium Falcon taking off. It's a little heavy-handed, as more of like you're as you're landing a YT 1300s taking off, and or you see a YV 666. Just like little references that reward people's knowledge, and it makes them go like think of Mandalorian. I believe it's episode 1, season 1, where like he's walking down the street and I'm whatever the, species Salacious Crumb is. You see one of those getting barbecued.
Yep.
And that was like
the lizard monkeys.
Yeah, definitely. I was doing the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where I'm pointing at the screen and look at that.
Yep.
Yeah, and it rewarded my fandom. Yeah. So,
I guess to fully answer the question from my perspective, I think that it requires a little bit more prep on the part of the GM, and I think that the game master, if you're running something like this that's an established universe, you should probably have at least a passing interest in it. And most likely, if you're the person who's buying all the books and running the things, you most likely do. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't buy it, unless your players are the ones who've kind of forced it into your hand and say, "Please run this." As far as more difficult, I mean, if you like it and you're already passionate about it, I don't think it's going to add a whole lot. But definitely making sure that adds a thing to it. We have another question. If someone, and I actually have a really good answer for this one. If someone
I would add. Can I add one comment?
Absolutely.
It does add a lot of more. Your comment about being passionate about is very important because I can't recall this one, but it was either like what might have been like Warhammer or something. Someone did not care about the universe at all, and they said, "Oh, whatever. This is kind of a bad system." Like they're like, "I do not like this universe." Well, of course, it's like you're already working against the tide of the game system. So.
Yeah, I had a player one time in both Warhammer and in Star Wars ask, "Where's the paper?" Because there doesn't appear to be any paper in Star Wars or Warhammer 40K. Everything's like written on data tablets and things.
I mean, at the rate we're generating iPads, I can see why that happens.
Future paper. All right, so the next question is from Trevelix. If someone were coming into an existing universe and had no experience with it, would you prefer or recommend that they do research before or go in with no knowledge? Do you want to field that one first, or you want me to jump in on it?
I mean, it depends. That's a tough question. I would say yes. They should probably like at least watch Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Like they don't need to know. I mean, watch A New Hope. It's also it's a classic, or even Lord of the Rings. So I would probably say yes, just so they could have more agency and understanding what's going on.
So I ran a game in the Warhammer 40K universe where I think I only had one or two players who had actually involved themselves and delved into the lore and understood it. And it was a long-running campaign from a lot of them. And what we did when we built the characters for those who weren't really invested in the system, they just wanted to kind of try something new. You know, what I did for them, and you could definitely do this in Star Wars because it's such a massive universe, is I had a couple of them from like, you know, you're on your planet. This is what your planet's like. You're hanging out, and then one day, a black ship pulls in out of hyperspace, and you're involved and embroiled, and you're going to have to figure out this universe. So that way they can learn with their characters. So that way when they look at a giant triangle ship and they're just like, "What's that?" And people are like, "That's a Star Destroyer, an Imperial Star Destroyer." They're like, "Oh, okay." The character and the player, you can build that into that psyche. And I think that that's really cool. So that way the new players can experience it and learn alongside their character. I think that is something that is very rare and is magical.
It is. I agree. Like, I don't think you should over-explain. I don't think they have to know every kind of character, because make a D&D reference. Like, my characters ran into some kind of monster they had never seen before. I thought, like, what is this? And four of my players were D&D players since like 2nd edition. So I mean, to be able to impose that magic. So those are very wise words, Karington.
Well, thank you. But I do think, I think that if you're trying to introduce, I would say if someone were coming into to play a game in an existing universe, had no experience with it, I'd probably maybe fill out a 3x5 card of things that they should probably know. For example, in the Star Wars, it would probably be things like there's a big war going on between the Rebel Alliance and the Empire. The Empire has a controlling grip over things. There's a criminal element in the world. And honestly, you could just have them read the first cover, like the cover page of like Edge of the Empire, and that gives you pretty much everything you need to know. There's a war happening, and you're either involved in it, embroiled in it, affected by it, or just living on the outskirts to avoid it.
Yeah, there's got to be some.
Go ahead.
There's got to be some, at least some kind of informational. At least they can't just drop into a game blind, because then there are I've seen players do that where they have no idea and they make a decision that probably is not a decision they immediately regret because they didn't have context up to some of the effect.
Mm-hmm.
So that a player with a little, even minor passing knowledge of the universe would have been like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like,
Yep.
say someone pulling out a lightsaber in the middle of a market.
Yep.
Not the level 1 character is going to have that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like giving some but if a character walks in like previous, and they have no experience and they happen to live on a planet where lightsabers are used, and then they walk into another planet, that may be a reaction for them because this is what they do. And then you can do all
Fair
kinds
point.
of fun stuff like, then you can be like, here are the consequences. But obviously not make them too harsh for the new player, but have them be like, all right, an Inquisitor shows up and you have to now deal with that. Or now an Inquisitor is trailing you and you have to resolve that. So, let's see here. So we've been talking a lot about Star Wars, and I definitely want to ask this question. So as someone who's run a lot of Star Wars, one of the things that they talk about in the core rulebooks, in each one of the core rulebooks, as I recall correctly, is making sure that the game has that all-important Star Wars feel. So what do you do to ensure that the game has that essence of Star Wars, the soul of Star Wars?
So I always, I go back to a quote from George. I don't know, this is probably not a direct quote, so I'm paraphrasing. But like when he thought of Star Wars, everything was old. Everything when he thinks about everything is established and old. So I'd like to kind of, when I'm describing elements of Star Wars, like I try to add the descriptive elements of little things. I can talk about the womp rats and the cooked salacious crumb. But like when they're in a room, there's like the way that things don't have railings and
Yep.
Just adding those like those peppering scenes with those little elements that make players just are reminded of where they are.
Yeah. Instead of using glass, transparent steel. Instead of using concrete, it's pour stone. Using Durasteel. And something you could do as a game master so that you remember these things as opposed to just like having them kind of up here in your mental Rolodex is to honestly just have a Word document and have the for lack of a better term, the translations next to them.
I actually have one of those, and just to remind they're not whatever you would think the word would be, what is the comparable to the established universe.
Excellent. So what would you say, what are some tips for making sure with the narrative dice system or with established universes that you do to make sure that players are engaged in the story?
One, so this can actually these can actually go to pretty much any game for keeping engaged. Know the pacing of the story, like gauge what your players are doing. Like, so sometimes there's I play like they don't want to do an investigation, they just want action, so I'm kind of gonna give them what they want to a certain degree. Like, don't make your players go through something because if they won't enjoy it. And also understand your players' motivations. Like, I have some players that they just want to sling dice. I have some players that want to RP, and they want some dialogue back and forth. So you get to hear me do my fun Aqualish voice, things like that. So understand that you are constantly making sure that the motivations of your players are met. You don't want to, if you have a player that he wants to, use some social skills, let him get to do that. Let him get to engage other players and maybe sneak his way past something. And then my last one was, and don't be afraid to pivot. If you get 3 sessions into a campaign and it's not working, either for you or your players, pivot. Like, change the narrative, send the players somewhere else. Don't slog through it just because it was what was planned or it was, it's what you thought they wanted.
One of the things that I really like is I have the players do the recap each session because it lets me know what they remember from the last time, and it also gives you a really good idea of what they think is important. So, for example, they may be following the red herring, and you may want to let them, or you may want to clue them in on, oh, hey, don't forget about this thing that happened, because it can be very important and can influence their decisions. You've seen maybe they picked up a relic or so on and so forth. Another thing that I try to do... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've thrown out red herrings that have become major plot points because the players are really engaged in it. I'm like, man, they've invested a lot of personal time. I'm really excited about this. And I mean, and it's like they've self-generated cool ideas out of it. I'm like, man, like there's the joke. It's like with a bad, like I know what the bad guy's motivation is, and they say something. I'm like, as I got a pencil, oh yeah, totally,
absolutely, never be afraid to pivot your ideas and change them. I know I've told the story many times, but I had a group of players that they started in a library trying to investigate some things. They moved forth through the story, and then they were trying to get a single clue about this unrelated story over here, and they came across this guy who was just named. He didn't even have a name at the time. It was just
Boblin the Goblin.
He was called the Duke, and my players just decided that this guy is evil and he is going down. And I was just like, but the rest of the campaign's over here. And they devoted the rest of the campaign to taking this guy out of power. They had an opportunity early on in the campaign to release this assassin that was trying to seek vengeance on him, but this person was kind of a loose cannon, and like they were concerned with like the collateral damage because she was a little crazy and would have absolutely just slaughtered every single person in the Duke's castle if she was unleashed. So instead they stopped her, and then they were like, all right, we stopped you. And they killed her, and they were like, but we're gonna stop him. And they devoted the rest of the campaign to, they're like, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna take him out, no collateral damage, and we're gonna do it right. And they did. And that was the whole campaign was just focused. Like we were going along here, and then we just pivoted and just went in a completely different direction, and it was awesome. So as Patrick said, never be afraid to pivot in your campaign.
Yeah, I like to think. So it's like, I like to do things like in 6 months, what are players going to call back? Oh, remember when we did that thing that was so awesome? I'd rather them be thinking about that than like, oh yeah, we rolled dice until we found the one clue in the corner that, and we spent all night just kind of, sitting there. So.
Yep, absolutely. Try to focus on the fun and move the story forward and move the story on. And if you have a bad session, like recover from it, take the lesson. Yeah. And I mean, not every session can be perfect. Take the lesson, learn from it, and move on.
That is actually, I mean, like you are going to have bad sessions, but one bad session is not the sum. Is only one part of the adventure, and sometimes a slow adventure is good. One of my best sessions was a completely non-combat city session where everyone just did backstory stuff, and I got a lot of compliments on it. Yeah. And it was like, oh wow, I thought you guys were upset you didn't kill anything.
Sometimes we give our characters who are very combat heavy, or murder hobos as they're sometimes called. Yeah. Sometimes we don't give them enough credit. And they really want to have, not only do they just want to kill stuff, but they want to have their character be cool and do other things. So
yes.
So for someone who's wanting to start out running, especially Star Wars, what would you say are some good resources for someone who's just starting out trying to playing in the Star Wars RPG?
Well, it's a good thing I have a prop on hand. I'm sorry. I'll make sure I can. This is the Edge of the Empire beginner box set. So I don't know who's publishing FFG these games. I know it's not FFG.
Edge Publishing now is the
okay. Edge Publishing has it. So I think there's some issues with product availability, but they have a beginner box for each of the game systems, and they're great because they come with an out of the box adventure. They come with a set of dice, and they come with literally a how to run a one-shot campaign for the players and the GM. I really feel that a lot of companies could learn from these beginner boxes. There is also the Genesis Core RPG book, for that's like the base of what Edge of the Empire is built on. For online aspects, you have the Order 66 podcast, which I believe you want the Order 66 podcast. That's the Edge of the Empire subject matter. I think it has like 100 episodes, and it's still out there. You have Star Wars RPG Community.com, which has a lot of information out there. You have Ogdude for people that want to do more online stuff. He's got Ogdude has a website, sw.saog.com, I believe. I butchered that. That has like a list of all the NPCs. There's Roll20 has some built-in functionality. I know Foundry has a lot of modules built in. I actually been messing with the dice system, and it's really cool. For people that are tabletop players, you have minis from FFG's Imperial Assault, Star Wars Legion, X-Wing, Armada. Those are all great accessories to help bring your table game to life. And then just all the books. I highly suggest. I highly suggest Starships and Speeders, because it's all the Starships and Speeders in one book. The Gadgets and Gear, which is all the weapons and all the armor in one book. And then for GMs, Allies and Adversaries, which is all the bad guys. And then the setting books. Really, I say, if you have a large group, it only really takes one. Like if you have 5 people, you could probably run the game easily off of 2 core rule books.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
It doesn't. The system is really streamlined as far as like sub rules. Like you don't have the class complexity of a multi-class fighter rogue that you have to look up 6 different rules with per session. Like no, it's pretty streamlined.
Excellent. I'm not sure if you mentioned the Star Wars RPG community.
Yeah, I did. swrpg.com.
I'm gonna drop that one in the things for folks to check out.
Yeah.
I of all of those, that one I've gotten the most mileage out of it. It's a really, really good resource. The physical books also are a very good resource as far as playing the game. But if you want a deep dive, I can't recommend the Star Wars the SWRPG community. That website is. I mean, there's so many free resources. There are tokens that you can use if you're using for your online stuff. Like there's so much stuff that you can use. So highly recommend checking that out.
So what else? Trying to think. And then for just resource, I mean, pull from any Legends book, comics, like all the 2016-ish on comics have tons of great resources and information, just referential material.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in all of, like, you have so much stuff that you can pull from the non-canon stuff as well. So do you remember a specific experience where you wish that you had done something different when you were running a session? And if you were to do it over, what would you change? I don't have I was trying to recall a very specific, so I have a terrible memory, but I definitely remember a specific kind of attitude as a game master. And the biggest thing I learned is like the point at which I learned it's not me versus the players. It's I am playing with the players. I kind of view myself as if there's 5 players, I am the 6th player, and we are working together to tell a story. Mm-hmm. So that's what I do now. I work with the players, so we're all collectively telling a story. Now it might be if you have an out of the box campaign and there is an actual ending, it's like, how are we getting to that end together? What cool stuff am I putting in front of them for obstacles and challenges for them to overcome, so we can get to the collective end or that. So that's the biggest lesson I've learned, but I wish I could recall the very exact moment I learned that. No, I mean, that's definitely a very big thing to learn. And it is, I mean, because you are able to affect the players, and in some cases, like, I mean, you can make their lives rather difficult because suddenly there's a swoop bike gang that swoops in, or they hear the thunderous crash of an Imperial ATST trudging through the forest.
I always like to think that I don't punish my players. They react. I react to the consequences of their own actions.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if they do things, I'm like, well, you guys were walking downtown, firing off blasters in the air. Of course, a bunch of stormtroopers are going to show up to investigate. So hey, it's like, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of a situation that I wish that I'd done something differently. There are definitely times when I wish that I would have, one of them actually involves a blog post that I wrote about creating and it has to do with what we were talking about earlier. Pacing is so important. If I usually I've paired my sessions are about 4 hours.
Okay.
When it comes to running, whether it be Call of Cthulhu or Star Wars or what have you, I try to make sure that if we're doing a situation where it is there's some setup or some legwork or some like casing the joint, I usually try to make that like the first 2 hours, so that way we have 2 hours to do this. So when I ran a session where I drew a map on the board and had the players kind of explore that map and ask a bunch of questions, I spent too long having them ask those questions and not enough time, because we were running so short on time at the very end that I didn't necessarily let them breeze through, but I definitely could have, because there should have been more things that went wrong, and it felt like a lot of things went right.
Yeah.
I would have definitely made sure, and I feel like as I've grown as a game master and as a storyteller, I have definitely tried to put an emphasis and a focus on pacing, and I am constantly checking my watch to make sure where are we at in the story.
Yeah.
Like how much time, so that way if I need to pull back and I need to slow them down, I can. Or if I need to like push the story along, I can say, okay, you've done all you and I can say things like you feel a sense of urgency that you need to solve this as quickly as possible because the information that you have may be dead, and that way it prompts the players to like, okay, well, we need to get let's grab the grenades, let's grab the laser rifle, and let's go, and then you move on. So
there's a quote I heard that says, "Characters move at the speed of plot." Is I
like
remember
that.
the writers,
it's really
and essentially to your side, like, so I don't do a lot of one shots, but if characters are having a really good time doing the investigative part, I will let it run its natural course until they're ready to move on, unless it gets to the point that they've gone such a beyond a point. But if they're having a good time doing it, let them keep going. Like, one night I knew my players, like everyone, like collectively, my group, like a bad day at work, everyone's just kind of in a grumpy mood. You know what? We're just killing things tonight. You guys are feeling like, it's like, hey, let's just slice and dice. Plot points are like literally like written out like manifestos. Like, I hid the thing behind the third brick in the left on the far. Like, okay, because it's it's just like I'm reading the room, so to speak.
Yep. So a follow-up question to that.
Okay.
Is there something that you have done that you wish that other game masters were doing, and what would that be?
Man, I wish I could sum it up in just one thing. I would say just, and I apologize, it's very generic and cookie cutterish. It's just like listen, know and listen to your players. Like, again, if you ultimately are kind of in charge of everyone having a good time. That's like, we are the GMs. So listen and engage with your players, so everyone can have a collective good time.
Absolutely. I guess my answer is going to be very similar to yours. I don't think it's cookie cutters. I think it's just very good advice. Is make sure that each and every session, every player is having fun and has their moment. And encourage them to share the spotlight with others if need be. That would be my biggest one.
And I think that's great advice. Well, because it's like sometimes I like to pay attention. Like, a player's got a power that, like, I go back to, like, a player has invested in a power that doesn't really happen a lot. Sometimes make it happen. Give them a reason to use that power, because they'll feel engaged because of it.
One of my favorite powers to get for a player to take is foresee, which lets them see into the future. The moment that player takes foresee, they get a double-edged sword, which is they can see a little bit into the future, but I will also give them visions of the future. And sometimes I actually will tell a second narrative alongside the main narrative. And I will like write out the entire narrative on note cards and then literally shuffle them up and give them to players that have foresee. So they're all getting a piece of the story and telling it out of order. And they're not allowed to share. They can put the card down and they can say this is the vision that I had, but they can't share the exact story.
That's right. The classic where the vision shows a scenario like someone holding a gun on someone but doesn't give any other information.
Yep.
And you don't have any context.
The best one I was able to do very similar to that, where there was a lightsaber cutting someone down, and the person was horrified, and then it ended up being the player doing it because they were like sitting there, and the person looked horrified, and they're like, "Oh wait, this is me. Oh no," because they were trying to protect this person, and then they realized that this is the bad guy, and then they were like, they were sitting there like and then they ended up not fulfilling the vision because they wanted to like not kill this person. But then there were additional consequences after that. So, community, this is your last chance. We're about to wrap everything up. Are there any last minute questions? Otherwise, I have a couple questions. Oh, here we go. Good from G Bear. Oh, here we go. Good discussion. Great advice. Learned a lot. Thanks. So thank you so much, G Bear.
You're very welcome.
Trevelix asks, what established universes would you love to have an RPG for that doesn't already exist? I'm going to let you field that one.
That is a really hard question because they're coming out with Avatar. I don't even know how good they are, but G.I. Joe and Transformers just for the fun of it. Man, I'm sorry. I'm looking around my room of all my... to be honest, an updated like Marvel... Well, a Marvel RPG would probably hit the spot right now, but I have to look because I did Aliens. I mean, man, I'm sorry. I'm looking around all my memorabilia around the room. I'm really hard pressed right now. I think, to be honest, Marvel. I was actually hankering for a really good superhero RPG lately, and I feel like we haven't gotten anything like that. And don't mind doing a Marvel one where again established. I mean, if you think about the Marvel universe, like, but it's like there's like a hero for every like a city block, but they never run into each other. So you can totally do something like that.
And that's one of the interesting ones.
Or DC
is like when it comes to all of these different universes, there does appear to be an RPG that for fantasy you have Dungeons and Dragons, perfect. Yep. For that kind of futuristic. You have Shadowrun, like you have those, but there hasn't there've been a couple. But
I mean, if anyone wants to,
it doesn't have.
Now it might be hard to find, but I believe it was White Wolf Publishing. The Aberrant system was really cool. It was a little more complex. You can get into Palladium's Heroes Unlimited, but again, I was never a big fan of the mechanics for that system.
Absolutely. So one of the ones I'm excited about is this right here. We're getting a Twilight Imperium role-playing game, which is really cool, nice. And I'm going to need to buy all of it.
All right. Free League is doing a Blade Runner RPG, which I think is pretty cool. I'm very curious to see what they do there.
All right. The one that I'd like to see is I'd like to see Arcane. The Netflix series. I very much my recent obsession is that.
Actually the next thing on my watch list. I'm finishing something up now.
It's very good.
I've heard it's great.
Very, very well written. I do not League of Legends isn't my thing, but the characters and how they wrote and like all of the characters, like the heroes are written in shades of gray. The villains are like you look at them and you're like you're a bad guy. But I see exactly how you got the way you are. Like it's very understandable. They
have good motivations besides twirling their mustache.
Yeah, they are definitely damaged people, but you get the story of why they did it. I would love to see. I'd love to see a Diablo RPG. Okay. I would play that. I would also love to see gosh, there's so many good ones. I'd love to see Diablo. I'd love to see StarCraft. I think that would be really cool. Not to just,
I mean,
yeah.
I guess, and I think they're already doing, but an updated 40K RPG.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was not a fan of the one after Wrath and Glory. I did not really care for that. But that's just me.
Sure. I think it's a neat system. But all right, so as we wrap up here, one final question for you.
Okay.
So if there's only one thing that you hope that people in the audience today would take away from our conversation, what would it be?
So I answered this question in the context of what we were talking about. Established worlds can be a fantastic place to build the story for you and your players. Don't let the title of a universe give you preconceived notions. Mm-hmm. So, and I say that for a person that has run it and a person that actually had preconceived notions and had them dismantled single-handedly by Free League Games. So,
excellent. And if my suggestion, and if there's one takeaway, is very similar to Patrick's. Go out there, try an established universe RPG, and make it your own. Make it your own. Tell your story.
Yep.
Within the framework of that. You'll find out that there is a lot more space for you to explore and for you to create than you would originally think.
Yeah. I would agree very much so.
Excellent. So thank you so much for joining us, Patrick, and thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Well, thank you very much. It's been great. I've had a wonderful time.
Absolutely. So just real quick, if you like the content here at openheartgames.com, check us out on our website. You can also please give us a like on Facebook. You can subscribe to us on our Twitch channel. You can subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. We put out monthly content with fellow veteran game masters such as Patrick Drobotij and previously Tyler Hudak. I hope that you had a wonderful time, and we look forward to creating more content. Thank you all so much.